Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we're reviewing the Florida State-Florida game, where quite possibly the worst season of Florida State history has now been completed. They finished the season 2-10 after being ranked in the top 10 to start the season, and the Florida Gators and the Florida State Seminoles are in completely opposite directions heading into this offseason. With early signing day right around the corner this Wednesday, Florida's arrow is undoubtedly pointing up. You beat Ole Miss, you beat LSU, and now you beat Florida State in a schedule at the beginning of the season that people were calling one of the toughest in the country, if not ever. And after starting off the season not looking good, you finished 7-5. I thought this team would go 4-8, so good job for Sunbelt Billy to get the team back on track, and they're flipping recruits and they're skyrocketing up the recruiting rankings because kids want to play with DJ Lagway, and they're seeing something special in him. And there's enough pieces on defense. Florida is never a team that lacks talent, and now they have a quarterback to show for it. So, again, arrows clearly pointing out for this program. And on the other side, you have FSU, who Mike Norvell just showed more fire at the end of the game by ripping the flag out of the field, the Gators flag, and throwing it away and getting into Billy Napier's face and telling him what he thought of the whole situation. And, he said in the post-game press conference that, he's going to do everything in his power to prevent that from happening again. And that's about the most passion you could see this whole season from Mike Norvell. That wasn't generic coach talk. And he knows this is the most important offseason for him because you cannot go 2-10 at Florida State. There's no excuse. And what makes it worse is this team was talented. It's just the message just didn't resonate with this group of players. And there's going to be a lot of issues where you're going to have tough conversations with kids who shouldn't come back, encourage some kids to go pro or transfer. And it starts today. There's reports about who the offensive coordinator is going to be, and we'll get to that. But in this game, it was a competitive game, which was all that you could ask for in the sense of they were a double-digit favorite going into the game. Florida was. I think the line closed well over 14. It might have been like 16.5 or 17.5, depending on which app you use. I know ESPN had it at 17.5. So, yeah, you lost by 20, but the turnovers killed you, man. Like 8 fumbles, 5 of them you lost. It's crazy. And you ask this defense that has been sporadic all year at best to keep on backing up the mistakes of this offense. And they finally couldn't do it. And then it was, the dam finally broke through. And you saw it occur once Montreal Johnson went for that 65-yard TD run. It was kind of held in control the whole game. But after that, the fourth quarter was just rough for the defense. And there's some things, again, that you can point to where, I've been discussing with you guys on this podcast about trying to find positive linings and seeing the young kids. And you could see it throughout the box score. Luke Kroenke, under tremendous pressure all day, still went 15 of 28 for 140 yards. Compare that to DJ Lagway, who had a clean pocket pretty much the entire game. 14 of 22 for 133, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Toafili in his last game as a Seminole, 9 of 43 with a touchdown rushing and 3 receptions for 39 yards. Luke Kroenke carry the ball 21 times for 32 yards. You do not want that to happen. Sam Singleton, 2 of 16. Mekhi Denzi, 1 of 6. Cam Davis, 5 of 3. And Roydell Williams made his return to the lineup and proceeded to carry the ball 6 times for a negative 1 yards. In the receiving side, Ja'Kai Douglas, Mr. Reliable, 4 of 33. Amari Williams, we'll see how serious that injury was, but the young tight end had 1 catch for 20 yards. Landon Thomas had 2 for 18. It just, again, Roanoke lost 4 or had 4 fumbles, lost 2 of them. Toafili lost 1. Cam Davis lost 1. LaWayne McCoy lost 1. And Amari Williams fumbled but didn't lose it. And the thing that just caught me by surprise when I was looking at the box score was how many of the young guys have filled up the stat sheet. And you kind of see the turnover that's happening with the expectations of who was going to be impact players versus who are actually making plays. Omar Graham Jr., night and day difference from that Georgia Tech game. The kid's passionate. He wants to win at Florida State. And those are the type of guys that you need that respond to the adversity and become better because of those decisions. 7 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. Azaria Thomas had 6 tackles. The interception. Sean Murphy, 5 tackles. KJ Kirkland, 4 tackles. Blake Nicholson, Ashland Barker, 4 tackles. Earl Little Jr., Aaron Hester. You got to go all the way down. If you don't count Azaria Thomas, you got to go all the way down to get to Shaheem Brown, who's supposed to be one of the veteran leaders, to get to someone who had, something in the stat sheet. Blake Nicholson also had a tackle for loss. Joshua Farmer, again, I know a lot of people weren't excited with how he started off the season, but he's really finished the season strong. And he had a tackle and a half for loss and a sack and a half as well. Patrick Payton, just another disappointing game. And I don't know if he's going to come back. There's rumors that he said that he doesn't think this might be his last season. He expected it to be. But now he's having questions as to if it actually will be. But I don't think he's going to come back to Florida State. This isn't a good environment for him right now. He came into the season with a lot of expectations. Came into the season with first round talent expectations. And that was his ceiling, and he hit the floor. So he's probably going to have to come back to college to get his stock back up. Marvin Jones Jr., sources say that he's inclined to come back. He had a sack and a 1.5 tackles for loss. So just overall, you're seeing the youth movement, and there's going to be a lot of discussions about who's going to come back, how you're going to distribute NIL. Is Luke enough? Sources also have said that Brock Glenn is leaning, and let me rephrase that. Brock Glenn wants to come back and compete for the starting job against Luke. Now, that doesn't take into account the fact if they bring in a transfer quarterback. I'm of the mind that they shouldn't, because if you can get both Brock and Luke to stay, you have to go into next season with Luke as your starter. You have to start proving to these high school kids that you're trying to recruit that you can develop talent. And right now, Mike Norvell has this unfortunate label that he can't do that. And if you look at his quarterbacks, you had Jordan Travis for a few years, and you've had nobody pan up behind him. When he went down those games, you had Tate Rodmaker, he was out. AJ Delphi was a top 10 quarterback recruit in the country. He's no longer with the program. And you've had other kids flip and not stay with the program. And it's just starting to get to a point where, to me, Luke is your last shot to prove that you can recruit and develop quarterbacks. It's a 5-star kid. For sure, 4 stars. Some recruiting websites had him as a 5-star. That's why I'm saying 5-star kid. You found him when he did not have a ranking, a star ranking. Nobody really knew who he was. And you recruited him and you offered him, and he decided to go to you. And he had a really good senior year. And he stayed with you. He could have flipped to Georgia. There was a lot of intel that said Georgia was pushing hard for him, and he stayed loyal. This is your last chance. This is a homegrown kid that you recruited for a long time. He's in your system. He started a few games. You did him no favors last night with the play calling. But he has to be the franchise moving forward for the next few years. And if you could keep a young guy like Brock in there, he might transfer, but you cannot bring in a QB transfer who has the expectations he's going to start. We'll see how that develops, but that's my opinion. And in terms of the young talent, I believe that there's a lot of good pieces on this team that should come back, and you need to make sure they come back. Obviously, one of them, I believe, is Luke Kromenhoek. He needs to come back as the quarterback. You cannot allow him to transfer. I believe that the tight end combination, whether Amari Williams stays at tight end or not, I do believe you have to keep both of them, Landon Thomas and Amari Williams. The type of matchup problems that you have with those kids, I know I addressed this last podcast, but incredible. You need to keep Mekhi Denzi at running back. You need to keep Justin Cryer at linebacker. You need to keep the young cornerbacks. I'm looking at all of them. In terms of Charles Lester III, Kai Bates, Ricky Knight, Jamari Howard. You got to keep all of them. The slightly older ones, Quindarius Jones, he showed flashes. He's got the build, though, and that's what you need. He could be one of the leaders on the team next year in terms of the back end of the defense. You need to keep Blake Nicholson. If you go into next season with Justin Cryer, Blake Nicholson, Omar Graham Jr. at linebacker, and probably get a few recruits here and there and develop some of the guys that you recruited, I believe that would be a solid linebacking group. Not saying it's going to be, like how it was back in the day with Telvin Smith and whatnot. Or even like guys like Ernie Sims or Lawrence Timmons. But I think that it's a good foundation to build upon. And again, you're showing young kids. I know Cryer is technically a transfer from Northwestern, but you recruited Blake Nicholson. And you have these young guys like Nicholson, Omar Graham Jr., and Cryer. I believe out of the wide receiver groups, you need to try and keep LaWayne McCoy. You need to try and keep Hakeem Williams and Destin Hill coming back. I know he's not considered a young player, but he's still considered an underclassman. I think there's a lot of potential with Destin Hill. And I'm just trying to see what this group next season, the expectations need to be a winning season. But you need to show it with the young kids that you recruited. So you have something to sell to these recruits. There was a lot of recruits. I was pleasantly surprised at the talent that was coming in to watch this game, whether they were watching just FSU or if they were watching UF as well. But there was a lot of talent that watched this game. I think I want to do that in a separate podcast. I just want to see before National Signing Day or during National Signing Day, I'll kind of reference who visited this And again, this is key because it's the last game. You can't really do championship game visits. So this is these last official, unofficial visits that you can take with that game day atmosphere before the early signing day. So there's some positives to take away from there. There's some positives to take away from this game. However, just this was the worst possible season you could have, outside of not winning any games. But this is not a season that. Man, let me put it this way. Gather my thoughts before I start stumbling over my words again. Watching the last year of Jimbo Fisher when they went 7-6, that obviously sucked. Watching Willie Taggart trying to coach his way out of a wet paper bag, that obviously sucked. Watching Mike Norvell lose to Jacksonville State, again, that was just, you thought that was the low of the program. But the amount of talent on this team coming into the season and how they responded is what makes this such a concerning season. You had a bunch of fourth year, fifth year, even 6th year seniors on the offensive line, and they were atrocious. You had a talented running back room with Roydell Williams, Lawrence Toafili, Kazia Holmes. Obviously, it's not a top-tier running back room, but there's talent in there. You had a veteran quarterback in DJ Ungalele. You had a weak wide receiver room, but you built it off of speed. You forgot to mention to these wide receivers you have to catch the ball. Your defensive line was touted as one of the best in the country. You had Darrell Jackson. You had Joshua Farmer, Patrick Payton, Marvin Jones Jr. just as your starting four. You had Fentrell Cypress coming back, Azare Thomas, and you had Shaheem Brown, Conrad Hussey on the back end. Now Conrad Hussey just fell off the depth chart. I don't think he's come back. There's a lot of talent. It just, the message didn't resonate. And I know people are going to reference the snub and a lot of the people who came back from last year's team and how Mike Norvell's message didn't resonate with the team because of what happened last year. There could be some truth to that. However, there has to be a level of responsibility levied onto the players. You can't tell me the season peaked on that one drive, the first drive against Georgia Tech, and that was it. The portal giveth and the portal taketh. And the problem with building a team out of the portal is the culture. You can make sure you get the right guy. You can recruit the right guys. But when you're trying to get all these mercenaries in the transfer portal, that's what you have to worry about. And it works when you're winning. But it can easily rip at the seams and fall apart just as fast. And you saw that. So how does Mike Norvell respond? We have rumors that Gus Malzahn is going to be the offensive coordinator. I will reserve judgment on that until the official announcements are made, and then I'll discuss the possibilities of him being the offensive coordinator, the possibilities of who he will bring in as the offensive line coach, and the possibilities of who will be the defensive coordinator. I also have some intel as to what happened with Brendan Marion, the young upstart offensive coordinator at UNLV. Let's just dive into that for the last few minutes. And then we'll just do a separate podcast. Ideally, before National Signing Day, they're going to announce their defensive coordinator as well. So we'll just discuss the optics of who they got. Gus Malzahn was chosen over the past few days. Right now, as of this recording, I'm recording on Sunday. By midweek last week, Mike Norvell knew he was moving off of Marion. There seemed to be an agreement in place. He was doing background. He already passed the background checks. He was negotiating the salary. From what I've read, from all the sources that I have access to, Norvell wasn't too keen on the fact that he was openly flirting with so many other positions, i.e. the Wisconsin job. And again, he played at Tulsa, and the Tulsa head coaching job opened up. This isn't a time where Mike Norvell can wait and not spring into action. You have to hold on to certain recruits like Solomon Thomas, 5-star tackle, or 5-star offensive lineman, inside offensive lineman. You have to try and flip certain recruits. You have to be appealing to the transfer portal kids. And a lot of the insiders started realizing that they were flipping from Marion in the middle of the week. And Gus Malzahn was a somewhat late addition. There was whispers of it, but then it really started heating up, I believe, on Friday or early Saturday. And Gus Malzahn, for those of you who do not know, is the head coach at University of Central Florida, UCF. He coached at Auburn as well. And he is a mentor of Mike Norvell. So you bring in a guy who's had a lot of success offense-wise, who is 60 years old, but no longer will have the responsibilities of being the head coach. And he will be the primary play caller. So you're seeing the shift of Norvell becoming that, hands-on coach because he calls all the plays, develops the offensive plays, offensive game plan, et cetera, et cetera. He is passing on the play callings and becoming a more CEO-style coach. So that's a quick backstory as to what happened with the hiring. Again, we'll dive into the optics and how it looks based off of who they hire for the offensive line coach and who they hire as wide receiver coach, as well as the defensive coordinator. So once those develops, we'll get those out to you as soon as possible. But that's it for today's episode. We'll have more episodes in terms of what's going to be going on with the National Signing Day, debating whether I should do a pre and then post just to see how it would compare. But we'll probably lean into the pre and post. So might be a lot of content coming out this week. We're going to have to review the Syracuse game, unfortunately for fans. We're also going to have the college football playoff rankings review because, again, it's going to be a very important one to see who's going to make the playoffs or not based off of the probabilities of how each conference championship breaks down. So a lot of college football content heading this way. It's the busy season right now between early National Signing Day, which they definitely have to change. Definitely have to move this off. And possible college football playoff rankings and implications of who is in or out based off of events that happened this weekend. And we will also review what happened this weekend in rivalry week. Try it again. So thanks for sticking around, folks. Thanks for listening to this one. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here. Oh, I almost forgot. Ooh, that was very close, very close. You know where to find us. YouTube. Like, subscribe, follow, turn those notifications on. Spotify, same thing. Apple Podcasts, same thing. However you choose to consume us, I thank you for that. And please continue to listen and offer feedback if you want as well. So, that being said, folks, it's Alan signing off for this FSU season at 2-10, unfortunately. But again, thanks for listening, folks. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.